Hello everyone, I'm Kavya and in this lesson I'll be speaking about Memorandum of Association, one of the most important document in the formation of a company. The lesson mainly focuses on the meaning of the term Memorandum of Association and also on the fundamental clauses involved in it. Now we will understand what do we mean by the term Memorandum of Association. It is a legal document prepared during the formation and registration of a company, and it also defines the relationship between the company and the shareholders. It also specifies the objectives for which the company has been formed. So it acts like a boundary, and the company can undertake only those activities that are mentioned in the Memorandum of Association. Section 2 Clause 56 defines it as the Memorandum of Association of a company as originally framed or as altered from time to time in pursuance of any previous company law or the present act. The fundamental clauses in a Memorandum of Association are the name clause, the registered office clause, the objects clause, the liability clause, and the capital clause. Now we will understand each of these clauses one by one. We all know that company is a distinct legal entity. Being a legal person, it must have a name to establish its identity. Therefore, the name of the proposed company has to be stated in the name clause. By this, it establishes an identity and also gives the company a personal existence. The company can be assigned any suitable name. However, certain conditions need to be followed. Section 4 states the requirements with respect to memorandum. Section 4 Clause 2 states that in the opinion of the central government, the name must not be undesirable. The name is considered to be undesirable when it is identical with the name of another company. It must also not indicate any connection with the government. The name should be such that when it is used, it must not be an offense under any law. Also, the companies with limited liabilities must include their last word in the name as limited, and that of private companies must include the term private limited. However, even though such a condition is there, the central government permits to drop the word limited in cases of charitable companies. This is mentioned under Section 8 of the Act. Therefore, charitable companies need not include the term limited. The next important thing that needs to be noted is that the name of the company must be painted on the outside of every place where the company carries on business. For example, if the company carries on business in Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, and Kolkata, the name of the company must be painted outside all these places. It must also be printed in the official letters and business documents. However, personal liability arises if the name of the company is misdescribed. This is mentioned under Section 12 of the Act. As mentioned earlier, resembling names are not allowed, and this is provided under Section 4 of the Act. The Trademarks Act 1999 also mentions that a name is undesirable if there is a previously registered company bearing that name. Therefore, before declaring a name to be undesirable, the central government must consult the Registrar of Trademarks. An important case law with regard to this is the case of Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders Limited versus Motor Manufacturers and Traders Mutual Insurance Company Limited. The plaintiff company was incorporated in the year 1902 and that of the defendant in the year 1924. The plaintiff company brought an action against the defendant company to restrain the use of this name. The court, while deciding this case, mentioned that a company upon registration gains a monopoly and no other company can be registered under the same name. If at all such cases arises, the resemblance must be such that the name of the company must be used to deceive the general public. For example, the Reliance Company. If at all someone else takes up the name Reliance and it creates a confusion and thereby deceives the general public, such resembling names are not allowed. Therefore, in the instant case, it was held that the defendant company could not be regarded as one calculated to deceive because any person who considered both these names would clearly understand that the defendant company was an insurance company. Merely because some similar words such as motor, manufacturers and traders Either it cannot be considered to be resembling in nature and hence is not undesirable. Section 4 Clause 2 Subclause 1 mentions that the name must not suggest to have connection with an unlawful activity or constitute an offence under any law for the time being in force. For example, in the case of R versus Registrar of Companies, two women formed a company for their personalized services named Prostitutes Limited, and such a name was not allowed. There are also provisions under Companies Act for the advance reservation of name. This is mentioned under Section 4 Clause 4. A person can make an application in the prescribed form and manner by paying the prescribed fees for reserving the name of the proposed company, and such a name will be reserved for 60 days from the date of application. If at all the company is formed but the particulars are wrong, the company will be directed to change its name within 3 months after passing an ordinary resolution, or the government can also take an action for removing the company's name from the register of companies or for winding up of the company. And this provision is mentioned under section 4 clause 5. The next important thing that we will discuss is changing the name of the company, which is mentioned under sections 13 clause 2 to 13 clause 3 of the Companies Act 2013. Company can change its name by passing a resolution in writing with the approval of the central government. This alteration, however, does not affect the rights and obligations of the company. This alteration becomes effective only when it is registered with the registrar and a new certificate of incorporation with the new name has been issued. It should also be noted that using old name is improper. In the case of Melhati Tea Syndicate Limited versus Revenue Officer, the company had changed its name from Melhati Tea Syndicate Limited to Melhati Tea and Industries Limited. However, it filed a writ petition in its former name. The court declared the writ petition to be incompetent and stated that under Section 23, Clause 3 of the 1956 Companies Act, the company cannot commence a legal proceeding in its former name when it has actually acquired its new name. Therefore, using old name is improper. Now that we have understood what a name clause is, now we will discuss the second most important clause in the Memorandum of Association, that is the Registered Office Clause. This particular clause specifies the name of the state in which the registered office of the company is situated. By this, it helps to determine the jurisdiction of the registrar of companies. Within 30 days of incorporation or commencement of business, whichever is earlier, the exact place where the registered office is to be located must be decided, and the notice of the same has to be given to the registrar, and the registrar has to record the same. All communications to the company must be addressed to its registered office. Now we will discuss the provisions of altering the registered office, which is mentioned under sections 13 clause 4 to 13 clause 6 of the Act. Shifting of registered office affects the shareholders, creditors, dealers and employees. The registered office can be altered by a special resolution and sanction of the central government. The central government has to dispose the application within 60 days, and before passing, the consent of the creditors, the debenture holders and other concerned persons has to be obtained. Section 13 clause 5 of the Act mentions that before changing the registered office, the company has to discharge its debts and obligations. A certified copy of the order of the central government has to be filled with the registrar, and a new certificate of incorporation has to be issued by the registrar of the state. Persons affected with the alteration of the registered office of the company has to be considered by the central government. A company can also shift its registered office from one place to another within the same city, town or village. But if it is proposed to carry the registered office from one city to another, but within the same state, a special resolution to that effect must be passed, and a notice of any such change has to be given to the registrar within 30 days of such change. The next important clause is the objects clause, which states the objects for which the company is established. Through this clause, it provides protection to the shareholders, creditors, and also serves public interest. In reality, the capital of a company is contributed by the shareholders. Obviously, such a fund must be dedicated to some defined objects. Therefore, it gives protection to the shareholders by ensuring that the funds are raised for defined undertakings. It also provides protection to creditors. The objects clause prevents diversification of a company's activities and also prevents the concentration of economic power. However, in the UK, the New Companies Act 2006 does not require objects to be stated in the memorandum. Now we have understood that the objects clause of the memorandum of the company contains the objects for which the company is formed. Therefore, an act of the company must not go beyond the objects clause, otherwise it becomes ultra vires. The term ultra means beyond and the term vires means powers. Together they mean an act beyond the powers. Therefore, the acts of the company must not go beyond the object clause. In the case of Cotman versus Brougham, it was held by the court that the function of memorandum is to delimit and identify the objects as the reader can identify the field of industry which the corporate activities of a company are to be confined. This particular doctrine was established in the case of Ashtray Railway Carriage and Iron Company Limited versus Ritchie. In the case of Ashbury Railway Carriage and Iron Company Limited versus Ritchie, the objects of the company as stated in the objects clause of its memorandum were to manufacture and sell railway carriage and wagons and railway plants, and also to carry business of mechanical engineers and general contractors. The directors of the company entered into a contract with Ritchie for financing the construction of a railway line. The contract was ratified by all the members of the company, but later on it was repudiated by the company. So Ritchie sued the company for the breach of contract. The question which arose before the court was whether the contract was valid and if not, whether it could be ratified by the members of the company. The House of Lords held that the contract was beyond the objects as defined in the objects clause of its memorandum and therefore it was void. It was also held that the company had no capacity to ratify the contract as it was beyond the powers mentioned in the objects clause. In the matter of German Date Coffee Company, the objects of the company as stated in the objects clause of its memorandum were to manufacture coffee from dates under German patent, to obtain other patents for improving and extending the said invention, and to acquire and purchase any other inventions. The German patent was not granted. However, the company purchased Swedish patent. This was challenged and the court held this to be ultra vires as it was beyond the objects of its objects clause, as the main patent which was to be obtained was German and not Swedish. The case of Attorney General versus Great Eastern Railway Company made the doctrine of ultra vires more clear. It was decided that a company incorporated under the Companies Act has the power to carry out the objects set out in the objects clause of its memorandum and also everything which is reasonably necessary to enable it to carry out those objects. For example, a company was formed to buy, sell and deal with coal. For obtaining such a purpose, the company can carry out those activities such as employing labor open houses, buying and hiring lorries, etc. Therefore, the company may do an act which is necessary for or incidental to the attainment of its objects or as authorized by the act. However, the company cannot devote any part of its funds to an object which is neither essential nor incidental to the fulfillment of its objects, however essential it proves to be. In the case of London County Council versus Attorney General, the council had the statutory power to work with tramways. However, the council was engaged in the business of running omnibuses. The court held that the omnibus business was in no way incidental to the business of working with tramways and therefore such an activity cannot be undertaken. The doctrine of ultra vires was also well established by the Supreme Court in the case of A. Lakshmanaswamy Mudaliar versus Life Insurance Corporation of India. In this particular case, The directors of a company were authorized to make payments towards any charitable or useful object. However, the directors paid 2 lakh rupees to a trust firm for the purpose of promoting technical and business knowledge. It can be clearly understood that such a payment was ultra vires as it was beyond the powers mentioned under the object clause. Now we will discuss the effects or consequences of ultra-vires transaction. Mainly, it can be categorized into 6 heads, that is injunction, personal liability of directors, breach of warranty of authorities, ultra-vires acquired property, ultra-vires contracts, and ultra-vires torts. Firstly, injunction. Whenever an ultra-vires act has been or is about to be undertaken, any member of the company can get an injunction to restrain it from proceeding with it. The next is personal liability of directors. It is the duty of the directors to see that the corporate capital is used only for legitimate businesses of the company, and if any part of it has been diverted to purposes outside or beyond the memorandum, the directors will be personally liable to replace it. In the case of breach of warranty of authority, it is the duty of the agent to act within the scope of his authority, and if he goes beyond it, he will be personally liable to the third parties. However, in the case of ultra vires acquired property, the company's right over that property will be protected even though the expenditure on such purchasing has been held ultra vires. And in the case of ultra vires contracts, if a contract goes beyond the objects clause of the company's memorandum, it is an ultra vires contract and not enforceable by or against the company. In the case of ultra vires torts, to make a company liable for any tort, it must be shown that the activity in the course of which it has been committed falls within the scope of the memorandum and that the servant committed the tort within the course of his employment. So these are some of the effects or consequences of ultra vires transaction. The last clause, that is a capital clause, must state the amount of share capital with which the company is to be registered and also the division thereof into shares of a fixed amount. Section 3 of the Act was amended by the Companies Amendment Act 2000 and mentioned that a public company must have a minimum paid up capital of 5 lakhs and that of private company a minimum paid up capital of 1 lakh. However, the amendment of 2015 has dropped the requirement of any amount both for public as well as private companies. The Memorandum of Association concludes with the subscriber's declaration. In the case of public company, the memorandum has to be subscribed by at least 7 persons, and in the case of private company, it has to be subscribed by at least 2 persons. This is mentioned under Section 3 of the Act. Subscribers has to sign the document and write the number of shares taken, and Section 4 Clause D provides that a subscriber cannot take less than 1 share. Subscriber cannot withdraw his name, however can do so before the actual registration of the memorandum. Therefore, the Memorandum of Association is one of the most important documents in the formation of a company. Its importance lies in the fact that it helps the shareholders, the creditors, and any other person dealing with the company to know the basic rights and objectives of the company. It also helps the prospective shareholders in taking the right decision before investing in a company. Thank you.